Good evening. It's Monday, June 3rd, 2024. Welcome to episode 65 of Porterhouse and Teal Live. On tonight's broadcast, we'll be covering Homestead news, Q&A, and Did You Know? We'll also have a segment asking you to decide from a random quote, asking if it came from a liberal or conservative, a weekly poll with the results from a multiple choice question, asking which of these two popular holidays is your favorite, and tonight's main topic will be from the tinfoil hat edition, discussing unethical human experimentation in the United States. Understand that this is kind of a heavy topic and may be fairly disturbing in a few ways, so viewer discretion is advised. And I didn't realize it, but I got on here a few minutes back and I saw that I misuploaded, and I was supposed to have gone live this morning at 6 a.m. instead of 6 p.m. So I hope nobody showed up for that mistake of mine. But we are here at 6 p.m. And how are you doing this evening?
Well, I have gone from excited to disappointed to frustrated, and I'm here tonight. So I'm happy to be here tonight.
Why are you going through all these emotions?
Well, I was excited because my packages from Amazon showed up, and they actually showed up early. Mm-hmm. So that was really thrilling for
Christmas,
me.
Yeah, just like Christmas.
Yes, it was like Christmas. And the items in there did not work out as easily as I had planned on. So that was upsetting, and it's going to take a little work to kind of figure them out.
Yeah.
And frustrated from putting up the chickens, and they just wanted to go every direction. And on top of that, also putting together a birthday gift that came in many, many pieces. That part's kind of fun for me because I like puzzles. So that's kind of like a puzzle.
Right. Well, she's the one who puts all that kind of stuff together. I don't have the patience for it, quite honestly, when things come in a lot of little different pieces and parts and all that. That's just not my jam. So she is the person who likes to do that sort of thing. So all the praise to you to putting together those little birthday gifts for the grandkids.
I know, I'm a kind of a weirdo like that. I get a little obsessed in it, and it's hard for me to leave them alone and not complete them all at once.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, man, it has been super hot here. I don't know if you guys are experiencing interesting weather out your guys' way, but it has been pretty warm, and today's a little odd. It's almost very like tropical, overcast. It seems like it might want to rain, but it's about 85 degrees and super humid. So that's probably nothing that folks in the Midwest aren't completely used to, but that's not something that we get out here on the West Coast, at least in the North Valley of California. That's kind of rare for us. But
the humidity part.
The humidity, yes. I mean, tomorrow is supposed to clear up and it'll be, I think, 106 or 7. And so that's the normal part for us, is the heat in the summertime. And so we are kicking off summer with a bang.
However, I understand that it's still supposed to be a little bit humid tomorrow.
Hey, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, there's something kind of coming subtropical, I guess. I don't know. Let's see here. Skane's girl says she loves puzzles. Yeah, I do not have the patience for them. My mind doesn't work that way. Hers, thankfully, I guess that's kind of why we balance each other out good, because she's into that sort of stuff and I'm just really not. So, yeah. So getting to the first segment of the evening, it was liberal or conservative, where I am going to read you guys a quote, and it'll be up to you to determine if you think this came from a liberal or conservative based on the quote. And at the end of the broadcast, I will let you know who exactly said this. But here's that quote. "The only way to maintain a moderate sum of happiness in this life is to not worry about the future or regret the past too much." What would you say, Rebecca? Who's that going to come from?
I would say that comes from a conservative.
Okay. Any reasons why?
Well, because you can't really change what's happened in the past. Mm-hmm. You can just pick up from where you're at and move forward.
That sounds very sensible. Are you saying the conservatives are, more balanced and sensible, or what do you?
I don't think either one of them are sensible. I'm
Well,
just guessing.
You must be talking about politicians. But
Yeah.
yeah, cool. Well, as far as what we've been doing around here on the homestead, I've actually been starting to get a little bit more focused on my fitness. And I entered a race the other night. I just decided to go on ultra sign up, and I found myself a little 50-kilometer race that I'm going to start ramping up my training for. So what that's going to actually do for me here around the homestead is it's going to make me a little less engaged or a little bit more committed to the time that I'm going to spend getting in shape for this race. So that's something I'm going to be working on. And I will also be working on all of the things that we got going on around here. And we've had a lot of high winds, which has been very odd this year. And I talked to my mom, she's 3 hours south of us, and she indicated that it's been very windy down their way too, which is very untypical. I spoke to somebody, I was in contact with somebody in South Dakota, excuse me. And they had indicated that, oh, it's super windy here. And it's, I don't know, maybe it's typical for them to have winds where she's at, but it's just been very windy, and it's forced me into some early summer pruning on my fruit trees. My young fruit trees are not, fully established, but they're putting on a lot of vigor, and they're starting to, develop really nicely. But as they put that on, the trunks are not fully developed, and they're not able to support that in high winds. So I've had to go out there and actually stake all of these trees that I've planted. But I also went and did some selective pruning where I was taking out the crossing branches and any of the ones that I know are not going to be something that I'm going to want to keep around. But I've been working on that. Also took a measurement the other day on my water tank, because at the time that I went to not Self-Reliance Festival, when I went down to Nicole's, I guess that's been about, a month and a half or so ago now, I was flowing 900 gallons every 24 hours into my water tank, my off-grid water system that I put in. And I took another measurement on that, and it's dropped considerably, but I'm still flowing 500 gallons. And so, it's one of those things that reduces throughout the summer as things dry out. But again, it's never been less than the first time I took a measurement when we put it in, which was, 77 gallons in one day. Mm-hmm. So it's been a very viable and productive, source for us. Also started feeding a lot of fodder, because the fodder is coming on around here. We have a lot of fodder trees, mostly poplar trees. I planted those years and years ago, and I continually propagate those, and then I can take cuttings on those all year long. And that's what I use to supplement our sheep that we have. The sheep out there are on dry pasture in their sheep tractor, but I supplement what they get by the fodder that we grow here. So it's just a perennial source of feed that I'm able to kind of manage and keep my sheep going. And it's really something that, it's great to have, because if let's say feed prices go through the roof and you can't afford to pay something, it's kind of nice to know that you can sustain your animals from what you have on your property. And that's what I've essentially tried to set up here. And we're feeding all of that fodder now. So I've got white mulberry, I've got willow, I've got several different types of willow, hybrid willow. I've got a curly willow that I take cuttings off of. It's not really a fodder tree, but the sheep will eat it just fine. Chickens will peck around on it. So it's just great having that kind of stuff. And then also a lot of the other things that you may grow. Like right now, I'm pulling out some artichoke that has kind of run its course. And then that can either be used as a chop and drop mulch, which I use quite frequently. But now, since the pastures are the pastures are no longer green, and I'm in need of feed for my sheep, I'm actually taking that up and supplementing them with the artichoke. You can do the same with your corn residue. You can do the same with your sunflower and things like that you may be growing in your garden. So it's definitely that type of, year for us around here. And it's super good.
So you brought up your mom.
Uh-huh.
And I'm excited about that, because she's going to come and stay with us for about 4 days next week. And so we'll have some girl time.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I'm glad that we're able to go down and get her and get a chance to visit with her. It's nice not just seeing, family and relatives and stuff when you see them at the holidays. So we need to make more of an effort to get down there and see her, since she's down there by herself now that Dad died. But yeah, we're going to have her up for what you said, 4 days.
Yes.
Yeah, loving it. The normal humidity here, and Skanes says that it sounds conservative to you as well. You guys may be right.
I think we could be good friends.
I'll clue you in at the end of the broadcast. Let's see. The normal humidity here it's very dry. Like in the summertime, it's usually down around 20% or less. If we have north winds and it's, high fire danger, it's going to be, teens. And so it's really nice when it's that dry, because you can, at least I'm accustomed to the hot weather when the sweat actually evaporates off of you, through evaporative cooling. And I don't know how you guys do it in the South. I guess it's just acclimating and getting used to being wet and sticky, and that whole feeling of, the just never gets off you. But it's super dry around here, and I really like that. What about you?
I'm used to it since I was raised in this area. So when we decided to move here, it was basically like moving home for me.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure that Eric was quite aware of how hot it got here.
No, I knew it got hot because I've been on fires and stuff up here, but not having lived here.
Yeah, but you hadn't stayed here for really long periods of time to understand exactly how hot it got.
Right.
It doesn't really cool down at nighttime either. It pretty much stays pretty toasty.
Right. Yeah. Guys are having some winds down there too, huh, Cindy? And I don't know if that's typical for you guys or if you're having kind of an off year. But I've noticed a few other people have said, "Oh, it's been really unseasonably windy." But maybe that's the climate change we've been hearing about for decades. It's finally setting in. I don't know. It could be. Let's see here. Yeah, I also planted a bunch of more eucalyptus. I've got a lot of eucalyptus that I planted in the last couple of years, and I've got a total now of 60 trees on this one line. And that one line is an effort to provide a little bit more privacy on our property. Having trees is, beneficial in so many ways. And I particularly like eucalyptus for the fact that they're an evergreen and they're not going to lose their leaves. And, you're still going to have the wind block, you're still going to have the privacy year round. And and they're fast growing and they're a great firewood source. So it's a really valuable thing to have. And I don't buy these. I just pull them out of the ground when I see them as small seedlings, and then I'll pot them up, and then I'll plant a number of them each year. And I just planted 2 days ago or so. I planted another 15 along that line, and I just got my drip irrigation in and running on them today. So I'll also be working on getting the remainder of the drip line in my orchard, because I've got 2 more rows to get lined out on the drip line, because summer's coming and I don't want to have to be manually watering as I'm doing now. So I need to get on the stick with that. So
you were also talking about fodder stuff that you feed the sheep. You brought the sheep up.
Yes.
And last night I had bought a watermelon. And so sheep are kind of new to us. I haven't really messed with them a whole lot other than just moving their tractor around. But I took up some watermelon rinds to them, and that was pretty fun to watch. They really enjoyed it.
They'll eat anything. Yeah, they're not real picky, I mean, you put them out on dry pasture, and then anything that they get that's green and especially sweet and juicy, of course, they're going to eat it. Cows eat it. Chickens eat it. Everything loves watermelon,
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. So you never acclimate to the humidity. You just melt, Cindy says. Yeah, I don't like it, man. It's really rough. I've been in the Caribbean and I've been down in Florida and, in this areas where you guys get that. And that's a typical thing for you guys. But it's hard. It's hard when you're out and, the sweat just doesn't come off of you. It's pretty brutal. But what do you got going on around here, Rebecca?
Well, I have been continuing to make soap, making jam. I've also been dehydrating herbs and getting those canned up and labeled, and spending time with the grandkids. I think we already mentioned that we had our one granddaughter that came over and painted a birdhouse. But the others, they came over to swim yesterday and we're just having a blast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely that time of year, man. They'll probably be over more this coming week because it's going to be triple digits. So, yeah. Also, I wanted to mention too, I just got some more. She's got 2 more soaps that she's put out, and I just put those up on the website today. And so those are available for sale. Did you want to say anything about them? Tell people what they are or whatever.
Sure. The obviously the coffee one that's up has been up for sale, and then the other one up is Biochar Bliss. So it comes from the biochar that he's made, and then the lard and the tallow are actually from animals that are on our property. So we pretty much try to use what we have, and then there's what we don't have. Obviously, I have to purchase, but we do try to use what we have and minimize what it is that we have to purchase. And then the other one was a little bit different for me, but it's lemon breeze and
lemon squeeze.
Lemon squeeze, yeah. Sorry,
you don't even know what you named your soap.
I don't. Anyway, lemon squeeze.
Yeah,
I really like it. Eric's a little impartial to it. However, my granddaughter just keeps stuffing it to her nose and breathing it in. She loves it. And I went over and asked her mom what she thought. And she just said, so this is mine, right?
Yeah, cool. So if you guys are interested in any of that, just checking out our soaps, go on the porterhouseandteal.com and take a look at that. We're also, you just started some eggs because we're like swimming in eggs over here. We got a lot of eggs. Even though we're selling like, 5 to 7 dozen each week, we've got a lot of chickens out there that are laying eggs. It's that time of year. So we are cranking up the freeze dryer, and she just put in 120 eggs in there. So 10 dozen eggs.
Yesterday morning.
And so we're getting those sealed up, and we may be offering those if anybody's interested. I don't know. We'll see. We might try to do some local sales here with them, but if anybody's interested in getting 10 dozen eggs, reach out to us. We don't have anything on the website, but
right. So, and they are raw. So they would be great to put into any products that or any breakfast that you're using to cook up, or
scrambled eggs
or French toast or anything like that, or baking with them. But yeah, they hold their nutrients and flavor and are really nice.
Yeah. Let's see here. I was making watermelon jelly and watermelon rind preserves so the chickens didn't get any. Yeah. We don't do that. We don't do anything with the rind other than feed them to the cow. We only have 1 cow anymore. And then the sheep or the chickens, we go that route with them, but we've never made watermelon jelly or watermelon rind preserves, but that sounds kind of good, I guess, right?
It does.
Yeah. Anything with watermelon sounds good. I'm going to get to Q&A. So let me pull that up. I've got like 3 questions, or actually a couple of comments. And
watermelon doesn't last very long here.
No.
You cut it up and you think you're going to use it for like a side dish for dinner, and most of it is gone by the time dinner comes.
Yeah. The one, let me get to Q&A, and that's based on a short that I had put out. And it was basically just me showing strawberries that were growing in and amongst an asparagus bed. And I've planted these strawberries in there as a companion to these asparagus. And I had somebody chime in. Her name was Doris. And she basically said, thin your strawberries or they'll choke out the asparagus. She started with 8 asparagus in a 4x8 bed. Now she only has 2 asparagus, and they've been planted for 6 years. And I just responded back to her. I didn't give her a very detailed response because I actually kind of elaborated further with another comment that had already beat me to it, essentially. But I said, sorry to hear this combination of companion planting had not worked well for you. I have not experienced this problem, but thanks for your input. And then I had somebody who had actually responded ahead of me, And it was from Ron Jendersick. And it said, "That's cool. I was curious about competition between the two, as Doris points out. There shouldn't be competition in the soil strata since they feed at different levels, which leads me more to crowding. I would be curious about the variety that Doris grew versus what you were growing, since you mentioned very few runners. Between weed suppression and shade, they should be mutually beneficial." And I responded to Rod. Let's see it here. I said, "Great points, Rod. As with most things, including gardening, your results may vary. I haven't experienced strawberries being incompatible with asparagus, even without pruning, because the roots of the two are not really in direct competition, and the ground cover provided by the berries generally will not prevent the spears from pushing through. They have proven to be a fine companion, whether pruned or not. But it really depends on the size of the space and the number of plants you are managing, and ultimately what you are trying to achieve. Strawberries can be a fantastic ground cover because they directly compete with other shallow-rooted herbaceous plants like weeds, and they further suppress weeds by limiting their access to sunlight." Thanks for your input. And I think the biggest takeaway from any of that for me is just that, it really does depend. It's another one of those situations where it depends. As Rod pointed out, what varieties was she using? She indicated she only had 6 asparagus, and I'm assuming she's talking about asparagus crowns. There's a lot of things that could affect the health of those asparagus. It doesn't have to just be the fact that she had too much in the way of strawberries. I mean, that's certainly a possibility for her, but I just want to make the point that I think it's really variable, and everybody's experience is going to be different. There's things that I've done that I think, oh, I've got this figured out, and then come to find out the next year is different. Even though you think you've done everything the same, there's timing of your planting, there's the seed itself, there's the soil conditions are changing, the weather. All of those things are factors which can greatly affect your success. So I am just trying to point out that I think it's important that we don't get into this, it has to be this way. There's a lot of different ways to garden, and what works well in your zone might not work well in my zone. What plants I've planted, as Rod pointed out, could be completely different from what Doris planted. There's many different varieties of asparagus. There's many different varieties of, strawberries, which are going to behave differently. So, and to Rod's question about what I planted San Andreas and I planted Albion. And then I believe in that bed there is San Andreas. And both of those actually do put out a lot of runners. So that's why I planted them, because I want them to send those runners out and to start establishing themselves. Now, those strawberries have been in there for 3 years. And I have no problems with them in that environment. I know other people who have grown strawberries and haven't had any problems with them, killing them. So I do think that they're a pretty viable companion. So I just kind of wanted to point that out.
I want to know more about the watermelon pickles.
Watermelon pickles? Oh,
Yeah.
Skane's Girl. No, let's see what we got here.
Well, no, Skane's Girl says that she wants to try it.
Oh yeah. GC watermelon pickles. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about either, man. I think you're making those with rinds or something. We don't make that. You've never made that?
I've never heard of it.
Sounds good. We have to look it up. Let's see what we got next here. Well, the next one was more of a kind of a comment. Had a few people chiming in about. This is on another short. I was out on a run, and I had encountered a rattlesnake, which is not uncommon when I'm out on the trail or out doing my thing. And I took a video of it and I made a little short. and had a couple people in the chat or in the comment section kind of battling it out, saying, you should have killed it. You should leave it alone. It's nature's creatures. All kind of going back and forth with this, idea on how that should have been dealt with. And I don't know what you guys do with rattlesnakes, but for me, again, it's one of those things that depends. If I'm out, as I was on that run, and I'm in an area where that snake isn't going to be impacting anybody, generally speaking, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to let it go its separate way. However, I have had the opportunity to come across a couple of snakes that have been fairly aggressive. And if they come at me, like they want to get a piece of me, I'm going to take them out. They're going to be, that's happened to me twice out at the bend. And you don't often see that. They generally speaking, they'll just kind of buzz and they'll let you know they're there. However, if I'm in an area, like for example, if they're on my property, they're not going to make it. I got dogs here. I got grandkids. We live here. So nature's creature or not, their heads are coming off. And that's how I'm going to deal with that. If so again, it's one of those things that depends, and people want to have a very opinionated view on it, but it's a case by case basis for me. I'm not going to arbitrarily go out and start slaughtering snakes that are not really going to pose a problem for anybody in an area. But if I'm in an area where there's a lot of people, that sort of thing, and you're in a camping area or something like that, the animal's got to go, man. That snake's got to go.
So do you remember the rattlesnake when we were hiking that did not rattle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that happens. Yeah, that happens. What's up, Tim Riley? How are you, man? Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Let me get to this last question or comment, or let's see what we got here. Oh, yeah, this one here. I think this dude was trolling me, man. I think this guy was a troll, and generally speaking, comments like this, I kind of ignore. But I just felt, for some reason, I'll just respond to this person because he's just being a jackass. And this is from, I'm not even going to say his name. I'm not going to give him what I think he's looking for, which is attention. But I do want to point this out. And this was a video, I think it was another short. Yeah, in fact, it was a short. I can't even remember what the video was about, and I don't think it really matters that much, but he said that I would have loved to have heard the information you were imparting, but I could not hear you over the crappy music. And so first off, if you don't like something, the best way to go about that is just to move on instead of being a dickhead and saying something negative. It interests me that people think that they're going to say something like that and maybe get somebody to change their behavior. I think that's what maybe some people are looking to do, is to influence people's behavior on what they're going to do. But, social media is a huge landscape, and there's a lot of different places that you can go to get your information or your entertainment. And, he didn't have to be there, but he felt the need to say something that was negative. And I, generally speaking, don't respond to people like that because it's not worth my time. But I did feel compelled to respond to it just because it was so asinine and ridiculous that this person even said that, because the video had closed caption on it, right? So if he really wanted to hear what I was saying, he didn't even have to, he could have turned the music down and he could have heard what I was saying because the words were there. And so I basically just, I responded back to him. I said, LOL. It has closed caption for the hearing impaired or NPCs that just want to hear themselves complain. Either way, I have you covered. And just left it at that. And if you don't know what an NPC is, that's a non-player character. It's somebody that sits on the sidelines that's in the game, but doesn't actually do shit. They're just there in the video game, but they have no role or no function. And so people like that tend to say things that are negative without anything useful to contribute. I love when people have things to say that are actually useful and they're thoughtful. That's awesome. I look forward to that. But people like that, generally speaking, get nuked from my channel. But I did feel as though I would give him one more opportunity and at least respond to him in that way. Let's see here. Question from Tim Riley says, did you get the fruit trees in your chicken yard established before putting the chickens in with them? I have a number of friends who have had their chickens scratch and dig up their trees. Mm-hmm. It was about the same time I started putting in trees when they were not established. So we, started the chicken yard and the trees about the same time. And so what I wound up doing to prevent that is, around the base, I've got rocks. So I went up in my field and I gathered a bunch of rocks that were big enough that chickens wouldn't be able to move by their scratching. And that's what, is around the drip line or that immediate area around the trunk or the root zone. And so if you don't do that, they will indeed scratch up your trees and they will kill them. But that's how I've been able to navigate doing that. But if you don't do that, you will have a problem, as you've indicated.
Well, didn't they start to do that, but you kind of headed them off by putting those rocks there?
No, I did that from the jump. It wasn't like I put those trees in there and didn't realize they were going to not do that. That was something that I did at the time that I planted them, because I knew, in fact, that's what they're going to do. They're going to key in on those roots, that root zone that's going to have, a bunch of bugs and worms and all the things they like to eat. And so that's how I've been able to head them off from that. But if you don't do something like that, you're going to lose your trees for sure. And you are welcome. Let's see here. I think that was the last of the questions for tonight on that. Now, let me get to this weekly poll, which kind of surprised me, actually. And this week's poll, I asked the question, which one of these is your favorite holiday? And the two choices were Christmas and Thanksgiving. 121 people cast their vote, and I was very surprised at how evenly divided it was. And it turns out that 52% of people favored Christmas, and 48% wanted to were in favor of Thanksgiving. So that was very, very close. Those are actually the two holidays that Americans celebrate, I think, the most. It's the most celebrated holidays, and it's completely evident whenever you get on the road and it's Christmas morning, there's nobody out. Or when I used to commute from Northern California to Southern California to go to work. And it would be like a 500-mile drive down Interstate 5. And for the 2 weeks leading into Christmas, 2 weeks leading out of Christmas, and the same with Thanksgiving, you couldn't pass anybody because the road was just completely clogged up with people going to see family. Generally speaking, about a week, I should say, actually. A week on the front side, a week on the back side. But you're not doing any more than maybe 60 miles an hour down Interstate 5. And that's just because everybody's got their packages. You can see they'll get all their presents in the back window, and they're going down to see grandma or whatever. And so it's a very celebrated holiday. In fact, it's the only time that Walmart Distribution Center, which is where all of the Walmarts get all their stuff, there's distribution centers, and we have one locally here. It's the only 2 days out of the year that they close. Other than that, they're open all the time. And so I was actually pretty shocked at that, how close that turned out to be. What would you say, Rebecca, of those holidays? Would you find, what would you think is?
Well, since our children are all married and have families of their own, so they have in-laws as well to visit. The one holiday that all of our kids show up all at the same time is Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is the best for me. We also host Thanksgiving, so everybody comes here.
Yeah. I would say Thanksgiving as well. Glenn Young said that he thought Thanksgiving was the holiday for him. Now, this has changed from when I was a child, because when I was a child, I would have said, Christmas, because I was all about, hey, getting presents and the whole magic of Christmas and all. And when we had young children in the house, it was actually still pretty cool. But when you get a little older, at least from my perspective, and it's been this way for me for, 20 years since we've been here, seems like, Thanksgiving has just always been that holiday for us. Again, particularly because maybe we do it here. We have family from both sides that comes, but it's a time where family can get together and break bread and see each other. And there's no expectation of some kind of a gift exchange or some kind of commercialism really wrapped around it, other than, hey, go out and buy some turkey or whatever. So that's my choice. And that's why I like Thanksgiving over Christmas, at least at this point in my life.
Also, from the very first year that we were here, we started a family photo that we do every Thanksgiving. And so that's a lot of fun to watch, because it's just like watching your family grow right in front of your eyes, because we put on a slideshow every year.
That's true.
And it lines them up, and you just watch them go from little all the way up to big and have their own kids. So it's kind of a trip. But
yeah, it is. But it's also, a reflection on those that are not with us any longer. There's been a lot of people who were here that were family that are now passed on. I mean, 20 plus years is a long time in anybody's life. That's a pretty good chunk of time. And, as the new people come in, the old people are cycling out. And so that's kind of a time to look and remember too. But, hey, good evening, Crooked Peach in the house. How are you? That's a pretty awesome handle, man. Crooked Peach. I like that. Yeah.
that's the way I feel in the morning. A little bit crooked.
Dean Mullis, Mariah Carey on the radio starting in September. Yeah, I know. Huh? Right after Halloween, or even before, they're putting Christmas ornaments out. I don't know, man.
Oh, did I tell you? Well, I was painting the birdhouse with our granddaughter. She was singing Christmas carols the whole entire time.
Too early.
Way too early.
Too early. Too early. Hey, so tonight's main topic was actually inspired by the thing we're going to talk about on Did You Know? And this is something that I was not aware of as of about less than 2 weeks ago. Same with Rebecca. She had never heard of this either. And so we thought maybe there was other people who might not be aware of what we're going to talk about. But I'll let Rebecca get the intro going as far as.
Yeah. So I was going to say that this is something that Eric and I both learned ourselves, and we're interested to see if you guys were aware or knew of what was referred to as the Radium Girls. It's a group of ladies. And I believe Eric has a clip that he's going to show you to explain all about these ladies, and then it will lead into tonight's conversation.
Yeah.
Oil company in Ottawa, Illinois, employed hundreds of young women, some as young as 11, throughout the 1920s. The women painted watches with glow-in-the-dark paint. The company encouraged their employees to roll the tip of the paintbrush against their tongues in order to keep the brush sharp while they worked, and assured them that the paint they were ultimately ingesting was harmless. Unfortunately, the paint glowed because it contained radium, and it wasn't long before the women started experiencing radiation poisoning and the horrible side effects that go with it. Eventually, a group of women, later dubbed the Radium Girls, joined together and sued Radium Dial. There is no definite number of how many dial painters died from radium poisoning due to these practices, but it's likely thousands in Ottawa as well as at similar factories in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. In 2006, an 8th grade student in Ottawa, Illinois named Madeline learned about the Radium Girls and everything that had happened in her hometown, and was shocked that more people weren't aware of it. She lobbied elected officials to create a memorial for the women, and on Labor Day in 2011, the Radium Girls statue was officially unveiled. The woman is depicted holding a wilted tulip in one hand and a paintbrush in the other.
Yeah. Dean Mullis had heard of it. Yes, they did make watches,
They
Dean.
did.
And I don't know, man. That's kind of it's weird when you learn about stuff like that and you didn't know about it. But yeah, luminous watches kind of came into vogue around World War I, and it was it allowed soldiers to be able to see the watches on the battlefield at night. And it's interesting that in those days, radioactive materials like radium were not banned for everyday use. And radium was used in a lot of common household type products, and things like toothpaste, cosmetics, food products. And its luminous quality was purported to provide health benefits, health and beauty benefits, including giving people shiny hair. And these women, they were encouraged to
glow.
To what was it called? Lip pointing, or
yes.
Yeah. So they would lick it, and they wound up with these hideous, disfigurations and cancers and things like that in their face and all through their body and their lymph systems. And there was a lot of women that were affected. It wasn't just these radium girls, because there was a lot of different factories around the country that were, doing this kind of stuff. But I can recall when I was a kid, that's how watches looked. You had, the glow in the dark stuff on them, and whether it was an alarm clock or a watch, and so I'm assuming a lot of that was, with radium and whatnot. But it's pretty interesting because the experts, those who we view as experts, they seem to have a long track record of telling people that things are good for them when in fact it turns out that maybe they weren't so good for them at all.
And knowingly, they know that they're not good for it, but they sell
Yeah.
it off as though, oh, you'll be fine, it's good for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of that is ignorance. They probably thought themselves that, hey, some of this is good. Now, obviously, a lot of it is wrapped around money. They're pushing this kind of thing. Like, remember, they used to tell people that cigarettes were good for you.
Yeah.
They had health benefits, right? They were going to help you with your digestion and aid in your sleep and all this kind of, malarkey, which turns out that's not what, and doctors were, hey, this is a good thing for you to smoke. That was a thing. There was also a thing called let me try to say this right. Thalidomide. And what thalidomide was it was a anti-nausea medication that was prescribed in the 1950s to women that were pregnant. And the result of that is that they had horrific birth defects. They had children born with missing arms and all kinds of other, health effects that turns out that wasn't such a good idea, but yet they were pushing that thing on people. So just kind of interesting. Yeah, doctors smoking in the office, man. Everybody smoked back in the day. In the 70s, that was commonplace. I mean, they used to smoke in the fire stations, and then it got to be like, hey, this maybe isn't such a good idea to be breathing this stuff. And it became more of a, hey, don't do that. But the radium dial, the radium girls, that was something that I thought pretty interesting. Let's get to tonight's main topic. And again, it was inspired by learning about the radium girls. And, another fairly recent discovery of mine on some of these was actually just learning about a lot of the unethical human experimentation that's occurred in the United States. And, this isn't really something that we were ever exposed to in school. And I guess understandably, it's probably not something that would be very well received, and it wouldn't be age appropriate for K through 12 in most cases. But, unless you actually seek to find this information out, you can go throughout your entire life and you'll never know about any of this kind of thing. And so we thought it might be useful just to have this as a point of discussion for tonight, because there may be others that are unaware of some of these things. And all of this has taken place in the name of progress and research. And there's actually an entire Wikipedia page. Now, full disclaimer, Wikipedia has a lot of things on it that are more or less opinion. And some of it's political in nature, trying to get you to believe one side or this or that. But there is a lot of actually good information on Wikipedia. And this particular page, it's just titled Unethical Human Experimentation in the United States. And hey, what's up, Hogs? How are you, man? Good to see you, man.
Dean, I believe it's Dean that brought up smoking. I remember going on a plane and asking, "Do you want smoking or non-smoking?"
Right. Like it matters when you're in like an isolated tube.
Yeah. Movie theaters, the same way.
Yeah, everything was like that, man. Cars had, ashtrays, and smoking was a real thing. I mean, it was a transition. At some point, they realized, oh, this kind of causes cancer and emphysema and, all kinds of respiratory problems in older people. Generally speaking, it's not as good for people as we thought, but they had to get beyond that big tobacco lobby. They had to get on the other side of big tobacco. And once they got public sentiment to change, and then it changed in, the medical establishment, and then, and the politicians were on board with it. And so, they became the pariah, the Philip Morrises of the world, right? Yeah, good to hear that, man. Yeah, I just turned the air conditioning on in here, man. I was thinking, oh, we don't need the air conditioning. And I looked up and it was like 83 degrees in the room. And I thought, I'll be sweating like a pig if I'm, so it's pretty warm. Yeah, there's been numerous experiments that have been performed on human test subjects in the United States that are considered unethical, because they're performed without the knowledge of the person that the tests are being done on. They haven't been informed. They haven't, given their informed consent. And
or even if they have given their informed consent, it's written up in such a way that the people who receive it don't necessarily understand. So the interpretation they believe and go along with it.
Right. Well, let me read you the first couple of paragraphs from this Wikipedia page, and it kind of summarizes everything that we're going to talk about. But it says numerous experiments are performed on human test subjects in the United States are considered unethical because they are performed without the knowledge or informed consent of the test subjects. Such tests have been performed throughout American history, but some of them are ongoing. The experiments include exposure of humans to many chemicals and biological weapons, including infections with deadly or debilitating diseases, human radiation experiments, injections of toxic and radioactive chemicals, surgical experiments, interrogation and torture experiments, tests which involve mind-altering subjects, and a wide variety of other experiments. Many of these tests are performed on children, the sick, and mentally disabled, often under the guise of medical treatment. In many of the studies, a large portion of the subjects were poor, racial minorities, or prisoners. Many of these experiments violated U.S. law. Some others were sponsored by government agencies or rogue elements thereof, including the Centers for Disease Control, the United States military, and the Central Intelligence Agency. Or they were sponsored by private corporations which were involved in military activities. The human research programs were usually highly secretive and performed without the knowledge or authorization of Congress, and in many cases, information about them was not released until many years after the studies had been performed. So, there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of experiments that have been performed. And on Wikipedia, they've kind of broken them down into these different categories. And like surgical experiments, human radiation experiments, pathogens, disease and biological warfare agents, chemical experiments, pharmacological research, and psychological and torture experiments. And, there are many different experiments, but one very notable experiment was a program called MK Ultra. You know about MK Ultra, Rebecca?
I heard you talking about it.
Yeah, but was this anything you knew anything about prior to me talking about it?
No.
Right. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who probably don't know about it. There's a lot of people that do, because MK Ultra is something that's talked about in the conspiracy theory circles, right? But in 1950, basically it started in 1953, and it was in an effort to place all of the different interrogation and mind control programs under the direction of a single program. And those different programs came together and was known by the code name MK Ultra. And it is a pretty widely known program, but what some people may not be aware of is it was preceded by a project called Project Artichoke, which initially was known as Project Bluebird. But Project Artichoke officially arose in 1951, so 2 years before MK Ultra. There was this program called Project Artichoke, and it was operated by the CIA. Now, the thing that's interesting to me about this is that the primary goal of Project Artichoke was to determine whether a person could be involuntarily made to perform an act of attempted assassination. And this was done through the use of various mind control techniques, including the use of psychotropic drugs, some being like heroin, mescaline, PCP, LSD, and many others. I find it pretty interesting and relevant, considering there's a lot of speculation around the CIA's involvement in another public figure, JFK, former president. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have speculated about that, and there seems to be a lot of supporting evidence leading to that possibility in some of the things that I've seen. But why don't you guys take a look and listen to what this has to say, and maybe we'll talk about it.
The CIA still has not released all of the files from the JFK assassination, despite the fact that they were required by law to do so in 2017. In 1992, Congress passed a law called the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, requiring that all of these records be declassified by the year 2017. Yet when the time came to do so, the Trump administration released some of the files while blocking others. In 2018, the full release of the files were delayed until 2021. And last December, the Biden administration released a few more assassination records, but still withheld thousands more. So why exactly would the United States government keep withholding the records from the assassination of an American president that occurred over 60 years ago? It's certainly not to protect sources and methods, because literally everybody that was involved in the JFK assassination has been dead for decades at this point. No, they're continuing to hide them for one reason, and that is to protect an institution. That institution being the CIA. You see, the CIA was very mad at President Kennedy because he prevented them from starting a war in Vietnam and invading Cuba. He fired the then CIA director Allen Dulles after the Bay of Pigs debacle, and he refused to allow the CIA to go through with Operation Northwoods, which was a plan to conduct a series of false flag terror attacks in order to justify another invasion of Cuba. Less than a year after rejecting the plan, JFK was assassinated. 2 days after killing JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald was then assassinated on live TV by a man named Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby was visited in prison by a psychiatrist named Louis Joylan West, and he declared that he was mentally insane and in need of psychiatric help. But what Louis Joylan West didn't say at the time was the fact that he was working for the CIA, and had also worked on the MK Ultra program where the CIA conducted human experiments in mind control. Years later, the Warren Commission, which was the congressional committee appointed to investigate the JFK assassination, would determine Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby both acted alone, and that their motives remained unclear. They came to this conclusion despite the fact that the CIA purposefully withheld evidence from the commission, which the CIA would admit in 2015. One of the lead investigators on the Warren Commission also just so happened to be Allen Dulles, the very same CIA director that JFK had fired after the Bay of Pigs. All of these weird details and odd coincidences, combined with the fact that the CIA still refuses to release all of the files, should get you thinking. It's probably true that the CIA played a role in the assassination of an American president. The biggest myth about our politics is that we are governed by the people we elect. Permanent Washington is truly in charge. The deep state is real, and they've affected American history in ways that we still don't fully comprehend.
Yeah, that's I guess if you were to believe any of what that guy was just talking about and you were to do any digging, you'd probably be considered or labeled a conspiracy theorist by people that don't want you to like start looking around and thinking outside of what the narrative of the people that want to control how you think. And so, these are nothing that you learn in school. This isn't anything you're going to learn in K through 12, and probably there's not really going to be discussed much in higher education either, unless you get into some kind of a class that's talking about, government and cover-ups and things like that. But it's pretty eye-opening when you start to realize that, maybe some of the things that you believed from earlier in your life weren't actually true. And maybe there's another side to what actually had taken place. Right?
Mm-hmm. I know when I was in college, one of the classes that I really took a strong interest in was sociology of deviant behavior. And that particular class was covering Hitler and watching actual footage of what went on back then. So I think that you would be able to find some stuff that's popular, but I think that there's probably quite a bit that they're still going to hide that you're going to have a hard time.
I don't think
I
don't think the institutions that are being funded by the government are going to be that successful if they're out there telling you things that the government doesn't want you to hear. They're receiving a lot of their grants and their funding and things of that nature. Maybe you're going to get some of this information in an individual class, like you're saying, a sociology class or something like that. But, this isn't something that's like really widely talked about. It's out there. You could research the information, but it isn't anything they really want to relive. They don't want to talk about the things that have been done in the past. And I think it's important to do. Hey, good evening. Have a good evening, Crooked Peach. And thanks, MS Sean. Appreciate that, man. That's nice of you to say. I appreciate the kind words. It's awful nice of you. I don't know if I'm quite that worthy of it, but one of my sons, let's see here. One of my sons thinks that MK Ultra never ended; it just morphed. It's kind of hard to argue that, man. You might
be very right.
And that's the point of this discussion tonight, is just the recognition that, if they're doing these things in the past, what makes you think that they aren't doing them still? And they're just in another way. They're just doing them in a way that you're not able to see it yet, or it's being better obscured from public view. And so, all of this is actually happening still. And what's, I guess, interesting to me is that there's an entire swath of people in this country that are going to live their entire lives and they're going to dismiss what they hear as a conspiracy theory rather than saying, maybe that's possible. There's been a lot of things that have happened in just like the last 2 weeks since we were on. And I think a lot of people's view of things have changed. I know mine has. I had a view as of a couple of weeks ago. I was thinking, maybe I'll do something different in the election. Maybe I won't vote. Maybe I won't. And not to say that even voting is going to matter. I still feel that way. But it's after what they did to Trump, and you see that just the repeated shit they're just rolling out right in front of everybody's face and saying, F you to the American people. You're too stupid to see what's going on here. Believe us. The other side is the problem when they're pointing the finger at everybody else that isn't an elitist. And the thing that's kind of interesting to me is how people that are on the left that are just like everybody else, right? They're just paying their bills. They're just going to work, coming home, doing their 40 hours or whatever. They actually are cheering for the people that right? Aren't they? But they don't realize that they're actually deplorables too.
Yeah.
They're just useful idiots because the elitists don't care anything about them. That's the thing that's interesting to me, you know? But anyhow, I'm getting on one here. Yeah, no, I think you're on the right path, man. We have to be involved. We have to do our thing. That's the only voice we have. Whether it actually, matters or not, I think we have to get involved and at least vote and probably do something at a higher level, even beyond that, quite honestly, because voting is proving to not really be enough in most cases. People go to the polls and they get their sticker, but by the time you get home, it's already spoken for. So I think there has to be more than just voting from the standpoint of the American people. Need to get involved somehow.
I still want the Thug Life t-shirt.
Yeah. That was a debacle, and many people right now are seeing that, and the people that were on the other side are having a harder and harder time defending what they did. But yet there's no real reckoning or real reconciliation for what was done. The thousands of people that lost their jobs or killed themselves because their life is just taking the wrong turn. Nobody's paying for any of that. It's just move on, talk about something else. But yeah, I don't know.
So when you were talking about, they're using heroin and other drugs, doesn't that kind of sound a little bit like what they're doing with the homeless now that are out? They're giving them clean needles. They're giving them alcohol. They're giving them.
Yeah. I would just say that, the more I learned from what has happened in the past tends to call really into question the things that are happening today. The people that should be providing answers they're not responsive to the citizens. We don't have representatives that are listening to the people. They're just kind of out there trying to get people divided. But there was also another thing I wanted to move into from the mind control stuff. They had surgical experiments that they did that was unethical. And Rebecca actually worked at this facility. She worked there for about 15 years as a recreational therapist. And it was in the town that I grew up in, down in Sonoma County. And place was called, at this time it's been called many different things, but at this time from 1955 to 1960, it was called Sonoma State Hospital. And it was an institution where the mentally handicapped and, with physical disabilities as well
It was the home for the feeble-minded.
Originally that's one of the things that it was called. And then it transitioned into Sonoma Developmental Center after Sonoma State Hospital. But nonetheless, it served as a permanent drop-off location for mentally disabled children that were diagnosed with cerebral palsy or lesser conditions. And the children subsequently underwent painful experimentation without adult consent. Many were given spinal taps for which they received no direct benefit. And in these 5 years, from 55 to 60, the brain of every child with cerebral palsy who died at Sonoma State Hospital was removed and studied without parental consent. So you having worked there, Rebecca, that actually is pretty mild. I mean, that's not cool. That's very unethical, obviously. But would you say, in your opinion, now this is your opinion, would you say that things went on there much worse than that? Or obviously it didn't happen when you were there, right?
Not to that extent when I was there.
Well,
However,
to what extent when you were there?
There were children who maybe had seizures or had some kind of conditions that the parents couldn't take care of. They weren't necessarily mentally handicapped in any fashion. They just had a disorder that the parents couldn't, and so they were told to, hey, take them to this facility, and they were dropped off. In my case, there was at least three, they were 3-year-olds, actually, 3 kids that were 3-year-olds, normal, but they had uncontrollable seizures. And so they were in this hospital and basically used as experiments for all different drugs. So they were very active 3-year-olds, but in their adult life, they had drop feet, couldn't eat, couldn't talk.
Let me just ask you, do you think that there was experiments going on while you worked there?
I would say yes. Not that I know for sure, but I would say yes, because when parents drop them off, they might visit for a little bit, but then they just kind of fall out of the picture.
Right.
And so there's no, working to get their consent. They're just easy target.
I've speculated about that for a lot of years. We've both talked about it because she worked there. She was a recreational therapist and worked with the handicapped, providing their services. And that place is open. I don't know when it opened, but it was there before 1955. And you can well imagine there was probably some things that were going on that were very unethical, because these people didn't have any ability to speak out against what was being done to them. And as Rebecca pointed out, the parents dropped them off because, they're retarded. We can't deal with them. They have these problems, and they just dumped them there. And it was a dumping ground for human beings, that had these problems. And there's been many different other, state institutions. There's one other that I wanted to mention. It was called Willowbrook State School in Staten Island, New York. And from the 50s to 1972, they intentionally injected children with viral hepatitis. And the research was to help discover, to learn about how to develop this vaccine for hepatitis. And there was a guy named Saul Krugman of New York University who basically promised the parents of these mentally disabled children that their children would be enrolled into Willowbrook in exchange for signing a consent form for procedures that he claimed were vaccinations. But in reality, the procedures involved deliberately injecting and infecting these children with viral hepatitis by feeding them an extract made from the feces of patients infected with the disease. And I looked into this Willowbrook, and it's a pretty heinous place, man. It's pretty notorious. They actually shut the place down, I think, back in the 70s. But they had it very well overpopulated. There was over 6,000 handicapped people here. That was completely understaffed, and it was just a horror show of how they were dealing with these people. But this is really something that's not all that uncommon back in the day, and a lot of these programs happened in the 50s. That's kind of a trip to me when you look back at like MK Ultra and some of the things that the government was colluding with the universities and these other entities to have this experimentation done. It was a lot of things were done in the 50s, 60s, and even beyond. And as was already pointed out, I don't think a lot of this stuff is actually completely gone. There's got to be things that are still happening.
Yeah, and I don't think that necessarily when these facilities opened up, Sonoma opened up in 1891, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They actually took those kids in and had them teaching them how to work laundry and how to work on the farm and milking and doing all of the stuff, because Sonoma was pretty self-sufficient at the time. And then at the time era that you're speaking of, in the 1950s and whatnot, that was considered abuse.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make them work. That's abuse. And then, of course, it snowballed into a lot more.
Yeah. But as with anything, though, it's not going to be. They're gonna provide some services. They're going to have some benefit to what's going on, but that doesn't negate the fact that there's some things that are going on that are unethical, and that's what was taking place in a lot of these facilities, because these people did not have advocates. They didn't have people who could speak on their behalf. And so, Hogs is on it. Yeah, for sure. And Dean Mullis is what I'm going to talk about next, man, is the Tuskegee. it was definitely atrocious. There's so many. I mean, that's one that's very well known, but there's some others out there, man, that are not that well known. And I didn't even want to really talk about them on this broadcast tonight because it's like over the top, kind of gnarly. Yeah, the one that Dean's talking about, the Tuskegee experiment, basically was an experiment involving 399 black dudes who were infected with syphilis, and then they were offered treatment by the researchers who did not tell the test subjects that they had syphilis and did not give them any treatment for the disease, but rather just studied them to chart the progress of the disease. And this experiment went between 1932 to 1972. Think about that. 50 years they did that. 72, man, that's a while ago, but that's in the modern era, man. You would think that, that's pretty recent, quite honestly. At least it is in my view. But there was also another experiment that was kind of maybe lesser known that I picked up from this Wikipedia page. It's called Operation Sea Spray. And what that was again in 1950, to conduct a simulation of a biological warfare attack, the U.S. Navy sprayed large quantities of a bacteria that was considered to be harmless at the time over the city of San Francisco in a project called Operation Sea Spray. And numerous citizens contracted pneumonia-like illnesses, urinary tract infections, and some other ailments, and at least one person died as a result. And, it'd be nice to think that this was an isolated incident, but it wasn't. It actually occurred another 239 times in multiple cities around the country. And this didn't get exposed until 1977 in a Senate hearing. There's tremendous amount of information out there about this particular operation, but it really should call into question if they did that kind of thing back then, what makes you think that they're not doing something like this now? I mean, if we know that this is something that took place in our history's past, mm-hmm. What gives you confidence that, everybody's on the up above board and they would never do something like this to the population? I mean, they literally sprayed this bacteria to try to see how's this going to affect people? Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, right on, Glenn. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for dropping in. And
right.
Yeah, thanks for spending some time with us. Yeah, it's a shame though, man. I mean, San Francisco used to be a cool place to go, for a lot of people, and now it's just kind of it's really deteriorated. But I think we're seeing that in a lot of our larger cities around the country, unfortunately.
They're actually kind of frightening to go to.
Well, sure. Yeah, there's people there that don't have your best interest in mind. Yeah, there's also a lot of human radiation experiments, which involve a lot of different types of radiation, including but not limited to uranium and iodine and plutonium and fallout research and irradiation experiments. One such experiment was conducted between 1960 and 71, and the Department of Defense funded a non-consensual whole body radiation experiment on mostly poor and black cancer patients who were not told that they were being, what was being done to them. Patients were told that they were receiving a treatment that might cure cancer, but the Pentagon was trying to determine the effects of high levels of radiation on the human body. One of the doctors involved in the experiments was worried about litigation by the patients, and so he referred to them only by their initials on the medical reports. He did that because he didn't want, in his words, that there would be no means by which the patients can ever connect themselves up with the report. And that was to prevent further litigation or involvement in this particular case. But
So what do you think was going on giving kids vaccinations in school?
You might need to be a little closer to that, I guess.
Okay.
Um,
I know I was given vaccinations in school.
yeah, I don't know, man. I got that thing on my back where they used that gun that shot the whatever that was in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was MMR or whatever it
Measles,
was.
mumps, and rubella, which I've had at least measles, mumps.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you would hope that all that was being done in people's best interest, and I think in probably most cases it was. They would have essentially wiped out the entire population because everybody at that time got that type of a vaccination. You went to school, you got that thing in your arm, and a lot of people have that dimple, right? Yeah, MMR Hog says.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Is that airplane and oh, it's a syringe.
So, but do you think that they were properly tested, or were the kids somewhat being,
I don't know.
given this stuff?
I suspect that they were probably run through the thing, but I mean, given the fact you can see what they've done to people, the vulnerable, ethically, I mean, they'll do anything, man. I mean, they just ran this last vaccine out in 20 months. It hadn't been really tested, and it's being tested now on like millions of people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the test, but I don't know. Well,
Yeah, it's worth asking. I don't know either. I just know that it happened when I was in elementary school.
Yeah, I don't know. I would just say that I wouldn't suggest that I would not consider that it possibly wasn't above board, but I mean, we'd be an easy target. Yeah. So also in the late 40s, there was at Harvard University, researchers began performing experiments in which they tested a synthetic estrogen on pregnant women at a hospital at the University of Chicago. And the women experienced abnormally high number of miscarriages, and they had babies with low birth weights, and none of the women were told that they were being experimented on. So to your question, who knows, man? We were all guinea pigs. We were just, hey, you got a sign here, or you can't go to school. And the parents went along with it. I mean, everybody's parent went along with that for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Because I think at that time, the majority of parents probably believed in the system. I know my parents did.
Mm-hmm. You got the shot, and then
yeah,
I recall getting the shot and then being told to bend over because they were checking your spine, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
To see if you had scoliosis.
I got to eat a polio sugar cube vaccine. Seriously? Or are you just funning? Because I've never heard of that, but I wouldn't, Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a lot of the groups that are being affected are the ones that are marginalized, groups that are ethnic minorities. You've got the handicapped, the incarcerated, and or women. It seems makes up like kind of a disproportionate amount of these types of experiments. And certainly with places like where you worked at, mental institutions, these people have nobody to speak for them for the most part. They're just human guinea pigs, test subjects. Mm-hmm. And I would hate to think that that's still going on, but I don't know that it's not, right?
Well,
I just think that there's a high likelihood that there's ongoing experimentation, and some of it's being done without informed consent.
Yeah, I believe that when the facility's closed now, but when it was open, I believe they were probably on more medication than they needed. Mm-hmm. And
it just makes your job easier because you don't have them acting out. You can over medicate them, and then they're just easier to deal with.
But in the long run, all of those medications do a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, wait a minute here. Dean says, vaccine was squirted on the sugar cube. Mom carried me and 2 brothers to the county health department for it. It was free. Huh. Yeah, that's weird. I mean, not weird. It's just, it is what it is, but I'd never heard of that. Huh. Did you ever get the sugar cube?
You know, it sounds really familiar. I can't tell you if I got it or not, but listening to that sounds really familiar.
Let's see here. I read something about LED lights used for mind control. Most countries had banned them, but the U.S. is going hog wild. Not sure if I'm correct. Yeah, I hadn't really seen or heard anything about that. I know they used like strobe lights and stuff like that when they were doing some of those other experiments with people. But yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I would probably look into that more so before I were to speak on it. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I guess if I was to put on my tinfoil hat, because this is the tinfoil edition.
Want me to go make you one?
Yeah. I think one of the most obvious questions is that, why isn't our government more concerned with dealing with some of the drug problems that we have plaguing our homeless, kind of like what Rebecca was saying earlier. But instead, they're looking the other way, or intentionally, in some cases, assisting them by funding programs that facilitate the procurement of drugs and paraphernalia. They just started something new in San Francisco where they're giving them beer, they're giving them alcohol, in addition to these harm reduction facilities that they've got everywhere, right? They want to help them not hurt themselves. Instead of trying to get them off of the shit, they're giving them something that actually helps them, we're going to give them clean needles and we're going to give them this.
Digging the hole deeper.
And so just think about that. Take what we just talked about and understand that if they were willing to do this to people by using psychotropic drugs to alter people's minds, and there's things being let into the country now by all these cartels that are making their way into Philadelphia and San Francisco and Los Angeles and all these other places, Skid Row. These are just experimentations that are taking place. Is that out of line to think that they're encouraging this, they're promoting this, so that it's just like, hey, they're doing it to themselves? If they're really concerned, don't you think they try to get them help instead of getting them more? What do you think, Rebecca?
Well, you've heard me talk about this before. I believe that they should be making them more responsible, more control of their life, and teaching them to be independent and wanting them to be more than just walking on the street. But they're doing the exact opposite. They're making them more dependent.
Right. So I know that, and it's obvious that they're doing that. But what I'm asking you about is there something behind it? Do you think that they are actually doing this, or do you think that they actually have these people's best interest in mind?
I do not think that they have these. I think it's for their own good for some reason.
Do you think that it's a part of an experiment, as most of all these other things have been experiments to see how these certain things affect people?
Why
in
not?
Different populations? That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Why not? Why would you want droves of people who stop partway down and look like a zombie bent over? Yeah.
Well, take a look at this.
Right in here in the San Francisco harm reduction site, and I'm going to see what kind of paraphernalia they're giving out today. They gave me a whole box of syringes. This is a whole box of syringes. Those are a whole box of syringes. I mean, literally for free. You can't even get a plastic straw in San Francisco, let alone they're just giving away as many needles as you want. I have Narcans. I have these sanitary cookers. I have tie-offs to tie off your arm. I came out with saline water, clean saline packages to cook the dope with. These are to hold, these little tie-offs are to hold these like this. You twist it around there so you don't burn your hand while you're cooking the dope.
Anybody can just come into this place and grab these bags full of equipment.
For free. And little cotton swabs to suck the dope up through. I asked them what this was for. This is a new one that they're giving out, these chopsticks, and they said it was a pusher for a glass pipe so you could push your crack inside the pipe more. Brillo pad to filter the crack in the pipe. Then they give you these straws, right? And these mouthpieces for the meth pipe. The most alarming thing was I asked where I could go to get some help to get clean. What program can I get into right now to get clean and off the streets? And they had no idea.
Well, there you go. It's, again, it's why would they be that interested in funding programs that actually make people closer to killing themselves rather than trying to get them well or get them clean? They're doing that. And it's almost like an experiment that they're funding, and these people are voluntarily doing this. And so they don't need the consent of the people to have these experiments run, because the people are consenting to it willingly because there's zombies out there on the street just shooting dope.
Yeah, that's mind blowing, but
yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. There's a lot of things that are going on in the inner cities that most people are kind of insulated from. They may see little things on the social media, or somebody's talking about this or that, but I mean, these are real people, real lives that are being affected. And, I think it's pretty sad that it's, somebody's mom, it's somebody's dad, it's somebody's brother out there. And
it's somebody's son or daughter.
Yeah. There's no concern for them to get better, man. They're just enabling people to stay out there and do their thing, which sucks. But, it is pretty ironic on the plastic straw thing. Got to save the seals, because they don't want them snorting a straw or whatever. But oh man, it's all about money. It's all of this stuff's all about money. It's all these NGOs that are being propped up everywhere, and they're getting funding from wherever they're getting their funding. That stuff's cost money. It costs money to put people in those positions. It's a whole thing, man. It's the homeless industrial complex. It's all of that.
Just let you know how much they really don't care about you.
No, of course not. Yeah, I think one of the things that I guess is like a common thread to every one of these experiments is just the unholy alliance between these three entities: government, big business, and the universities. And there isn't a single one of these experiments that isn't occurring that doesn't have a tie to at least one of these entities. But, I said it earlier, but I think it's just kind of interesting to me that there's so many people who are willing to put their faith and trust in these institutions. And it's either just a lack of, wanting to think about something that was told to them that there was a conspiracy. But when people were to really open their eyes, they might, might see something different. I don't know, but we're just being forced into this left-right choice. And, I just wanted to bring awareness to this tonight, you guys, because I think it's important to talk about, the bad part of our history as well as the good stuff. In school, we learn a lot about the good things. We learn,
we learn things that actually are not true.
Well, sure. They're just going to tell you that the 80% of the part that, they want you to know, and they leave out the other 20%, which could be pretty shitty. Mm-hmm. And so it's important just to know the good and the bad, so you can, it allows you to make a much more informed decision about the world that you live in. And, I know my views have changed on a lot of things when I started learning, the world that I lived or I grew up in wasn't what I thought, Yeah. It changes your opinion. I don't know. I guess, my hope for this episode is it would just force people to think more critically and realize that the strength that, we have is just, it lies with uniting against a common enemy. And that goes back to that unholy alliance that I spoke of,
Mm-hmm. Question everything that they're saying.
We should. I mean, that's the only way are going to not just be led down a path somewhere, you know? And so let me get to that last segment, which is liberal or conservative. And I had said this at the start of the broadcast, but I'll read it again. It's the only way to maintain a moderate sum of happiness in this life is to not worry about the future or regret the past too much. And I had some folks chime in that they thought it was conservative. And you would be right, because that quote came from Mel Gibson, who is fairly well conservative. So I thought that was an interesting quote, and one that I tend to agree with. What's this, man? What do we got? Let's see here. Instead of free drugs, they should be handing out fruit trees. Free fruit trees. Yeah, man. You know what they do with that fruit, though, man? They'd make Pruno out of it. They'd be making some hooch. You know it. Plum Island and Lyme disease. I don't know about that. I should look that up. Yeah, it says can't erase history even though they try hard. People still need to hear about it. Yeah, what they actually do, man, is they take everything that was good and they make it not good. You ever notice that? They redefine everything. Like remember when rainbows used to be cool in the 70s? It was cool. Yeah, it was cool to have a rainbow on your shirt. You know, it's not so cool anymore. You know, because they've turned it into something political. And that's the unfortunate part about it. You know, my wife wanted to change her.
I'm changing my birthday.
She wants to change her birthday to July. She's a June baby, but they made it Pride Month. So she's like, I'm changing it to July. Yeah, I don't know, man. Liberals tend to do that. They take things and they fuck it all up. You know, they just do, man.
It shouldn't matter for you.
Or I shouldn't say liberals. I should say
anyway.
totalitarians. People who are totalitarian, you know, because there's another dude who kind of screwed shit up, man. Remember that? I mean, who's naming their kid Adolf? You can't name your kid Adolf. That's that's off the table, man. He screwed that up. You know, I don't know. Oh boy. Yeah.
Maybe we should talk sometime about all of the interesting names out there.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
There's some pretty strange ones.
Yes, there is. There is. Yeah, I'd just like to leave you guys with this thought, and this is from one of the great Supreme Court justices, and he expresses the importance of free thought and identifies the true enemy that threatens our liberties. And this is a dude I respect, because if you recall, when he was trying to get confirmed and, you know, he had to go through all of that bullshit they put him through, you know, you had a bunch of racist bastards up there that were pointing the finger at him when they should have been pointing the finger back at themselves. But they cooked up some bullshit on him too with that Anita Hill thing. I don't know if you guys remember that, but, yeah, that wasn't pretty. But you had Joe Biden sitting up there with Teddy Kennedy and all the rest of these dudes that were there then, and they're still there now, if they're not dead in office. But anyhow, I wanted to leave you with this thought from a great Supreme Court Justice, Clarence Thomas.
It goes back to the thing about affirmative action. You have to believe in affirmative action because we think you ought to believe in affirmative action. Well, how's that different from slavery? How's that different from segregation? How's that different from being told you can't walk across that park? Oh, you can't think those thoughts. How's that any different? You know what? I'd prefer to be excluded from the park because I can live my life quite freely without having set foot in a park. But you can't live it freely without having your own thoughts. I felt as though in my life I had been looking at the wrong people as the people who would be problematic toward me. We were told that, oh, it's going to be the bigot in the pickup truck, it's going to be the Klansman, it's going to be the rural sheriff. And I'm not saying that there weren't some of those who were bad, but it turned out that through all of that, ultimately the biggest impediment was the modern day liberal. That they were the ones who would discount all those things because they have one issue or because they have the authority, the power to caricature you.
Yeah, man, I agree. He's a solid dude, man. He comes down on the side of the Constitution, and I think he tends to take politics out of it more so than most of the justices that are out there. And it's really interesting how we've gotten to the point where we select these people based on their ideology rather than selecting people who are just going to do what they should do to adhere to the Constitution to protect our liberties. But I'm telling you, when that goes, when the Supreme Court goes, that's going to be the death of this country. 100%. No turning back. And that sounds pretty dire, but that's the truth of the matter. That was the one thing that I said when Trump, I said, if there's nothing else that guy does for me, the fact that he's got 3 Supreme Court justice picks is huge, because that's going to be his legacy. You know, he's there for 4 years, does what he does, but those people are going to be there for a long time. And he picks some decent ones. I think there might be a wolf in sheep's clothing in there, but that's the ultimate arbiter of the protection of our liberties. And Clarence Thomas has been somebody who's been able to, adhere to the principles of the Constitution. And I thank him and many others for that, but it's weird. Dude, Adolph's Original Meat Tenderizer by McCormick is still going strong. Yeah, he's Adolph. Yeah, you don't see people naming their kid that, dude. That's just kind of off the table. And he kind of screwed up the mustache too. That used to be kind of a good look right there, but you can't really rock that too well.
Excuse me?
Huh? No, that could have been a good look.
No.
Okay. Yeah, right on. Well, hey guys, I think we're gonna bounce tonight, and we still gotta finish up some things outside and go have some dinner and whatnot. But I appreciate everybody coming in tonight and hanging out with us for a little bit. And yeah.
Yes, thank you to all of you guys for dropping in.
Yeah, remember, you can go and check out the site, and if you need some comfrey, we got you covered. Got some Bocking 14, and whether you need crowns or whether you need root cuttings. And plus, Rebecca's got her new soap. So if you guys are looking at
that, I don't know if you put the jams on there yet.
No, didn't do that.
But we also have mulberry jam and loganberry jam.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. And you can catch this rebroadcast, guys, as always, on our Spotify account over there at Porterhouse and Teal Live. And go out tomorrow and be better than you were today. Do you have anything else you want to add?
You guys are awesome.
Yep. Homesteading's not harmful content. Take care, guys.
Good night.